to Political Hitman on Israel News Talk Radio. Want to connect with Howie? Email him at howie@israelnewstalkradio.com. Now here's your host, Howie Silberger.
It is very interesting when you think about how your career moves faster sometimes than you think it does, and how much you cover in the course of a career. I started on commercial radio just after 9/11. I had been doing a show on community radio before that, and we've been going ever since. So there's been multiple different shows, multiple different radio stations, multiple different ways that I've been on the air, and I've been hosting ever since. And somehow this current war with Iran, somehow this current attack on Iran, and this current situation that Israel and the world is in, feels different than anything I've covered in my entire career. Hi, I'm Howie Silberger. This is Political Hitman on Israel News Talk Radio. And let me explain to you why. We are here, Jews are right up against the holiday of Purim. And the ironic part about Purim is the fall of the Persian Empire happened on Purim thousands of years ago. And for that to happen again on Purim just seems, some people say it's coincidental. Just to me, it appears to be the hand of God. The Iranians have been persecuting their own people for decades. They've been funding terror around the world for just about as much time. Since they came to power, since the radical mullahs came to power, they've been funding terrorism around the world. They are responsible for the deaths of many, many, many people. And yet they seem to have gotten away with it. Just a few years ago, maybe less than a decade ago, the President of the United States, then Barack Obama, made a deal with Iran about nuclear weapons. And he shipped them a pallet with over $1 billion in cash. It just seems that the world had been working with the Iranians, sometimes even helping to fund world terrorism. And when I say world terrorism, although we see terrorism around the world, a lot of the people and organizations that Iran was funding were specifically designed to attack Israel and murder Jews. And so it's very difficult for me to be critical of a military operation that took out the regime that had vowed to destroy the Jewish state, that had vowed to kill Jews and as many Jews as possible, that had practiced, the words meant something, because they didn't just stand back and say, this is what we want to do. They actually funded people to go out and do what they wanted to do. They put their money where their mouths were, and they tried to implement their plan. Organizations like Islamic Jihad, Hamas, were all funded by Iran. It's fascinating that for so many years, Iran has been a central part of the strife and the indignation and the oppression in the Middle East, from Iran funding organizations that were disruptors in Syria, from Iran funding organizations that were disruptors in Lebanon, from Iran funding organizations that were disruptors in Israel, from Iran funding rebel groups in Jordan. It didn't seem like there was any country in that region that Iran didn't have their tentacles in and weren't funding to disrupt, destroy, or cause an imbalance in society. Now, there are many reasons for that. The main reason is the price of oil. Iran is a major supplier of oil. maybe not to North America, but to Europe and to Asia. And manipulating the price of oil is always easier when there's a war happening somewhere. So if Hezbollah starts a war with Israel, the price of oil goes up. If Hamas attacks Gaza, the price of oil goes up. So any political strife, any kind of problem that happens in the Middle East, Iran saw an influx in oil. And oil sales is what funded terrorism. And so when the Americas and other countries decided to boycott Iran for oil, they weren't going to buy Iranian oil anymore. They shut the pipes, and the cost of oil jumped substantially. So it's quite interesting that the world allowed this to go on for so long. Even more interesting is that after the American-Israeli attack, after the attack on Iran, the United Nations didn't jump in support of the removal of the Iranian regime. They didn't say that this was a good thing to alleviate millions of people of a despotic dictatorship. That wasn't a good thing in the minds of the UN. But there was a split vote on whether they should condemn the United States and Israel for the attack. Protesters, the ones who were protesting, the pro-Hamas protesters and the Occupy Wall Street protesters and the Black Lives Matter protesters, who are all the same people funded by the same organizations, all these socialist groups, actually got up to protest against the attack on Iran. And what's fascinating about that, if you look at the imagery, it's absolutely fascinating that women in Iran, when they found out that the Ayatollah was killed in one of the American raids, or one of the Israeli raids on Iran, women in Iran pulled off their headdresses, they pulled off their hijabs and uncovered their faces and started dancing in the street. Women in America were protesting against the attack on Iran. I guess purportedly protesting in favor of the subjugation of the women of Iran, in favor of the continued oppression of the Iranian people. I'm not sure. The problem is that people are so blinded by their hatred of freedom, hatred of American values, hatred of democracy, that they don't sometimes look at the bigger picture. They don't sometimes understand that the despotic regimes that they're supporting, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Iranian regime, that these despotic regimes that they're supporting are actually oppressing millions and millions and millions of people. Now, I'm not sure if this is a willful blindness or if this is just stupidity. It could go either way. I'm not sure which way it goes. But it is annoying to understand that people who claim to be peace advocates, people who claim to be kumbaya people, the people who want peace and love, are the ones who are protesting against the liberators of millions of people. It's almost as if, somebody was protesting against the Allies taking out the Nazis. Why would you do that? You're saving millions of people. Do you prefer women to be subjugated to strict 14th century law? Do you prefer women not being able to vote, to walk in the streets by themselves, to drive a car? Do you prefer women to have to ask permission to go to the bathroom? I mean, like what's wrong with you? If you believe in peace and you believe in love and you believe in harmony, then you should be celebrating with the rest of the world that this despotic Islamic regime has fallen, that the leadership has been killed, and that the people of Iran could finally be free. But if you choose not to celebrate that, if you choose to go the other way, then is that what you wish upon the people of the world? Do you wish that this Islamic regime would have spread around the world and that you would have been subjugated to that? The women dancing in the street in Iran tell the whole story. The women protesting in the streets of New York, I don't know what story they're trying to tell. It reminds me of the Gays for Palestine movement, where homosexuals decided to get up and protest in favor of Hamas. knowing full well that Hamas takes gays and throws them off buildings and murders them. But yet hundreds, thousands of homosexuals in Americas and in Europe decided to get up and protest in favor of Hamas. I know politics is very difficult. I know they don't teach history as much as they should in schools, and I know that a lot of people find politics annoying and boring. But if you're going to get up and protest something, at least know what you're protesting. At least understand what you're doing. And going online is no better. The armchair pundits online, the political idiots online, the useful idiots online, posting stupid stuff like, because Trump was involved in this attack, maybe he was trying to cover up over some other scandal. Oh, come on, give me a break. Give me a break. Put aside your hatred for Trump. Put aside your hatred for democracy. Put aside your hatred for America just for a second and realize how wonderful and how great this moment in time is, and how powerful this moment in time is, and how life-changing this is for the people of Iran, and how this is going to change the region, how this is going to change the Middle East and the world. So what's going to happen now? So this war is not going to last forever. It'll be over in a few days. It might be over by the time you hear the show. When the war is over, what is going to happen is a new regime is going to rise up in Iran, hopefully a regime that's not an Islamic dictatorship. And the people of Iran will start living normal lives again. The thought police and the dress police and the moral police will stop working in Iran, and Iranian people will be able to live as morally or as immorally as they choose. Aside from that, Iranian superpower will be gone. The threat of nuclear attacks from Iran will be gone. With them gone, Israel will become one of the superpowers. They already are, but they'll become a major superpower in the Middle East. And many of the Arab countries that once stood against Israel, and stood against Israel because they were afraid of Iran, will now sign the Abraham Accords and join the Accords, and the Middle East might become the paradise that it was meant to be. It might become the Riviera of Africa. And that's what one hopes for. The Middle East should be a very prosperous place. There is no reason why the Arab countries and the Jewish country can't do business together. The only reason is Islamic radicalism. And once we get rid of the Islamic radicalism, once that disappears from the region, I can't see normal people waiting very long to do business and to make money. Now, money doesn't rule everything, and money isn't everything. And you'll always have the Islamic hardheads, the Islamic diehards, who will continue to fight for their cause. So that aspect of it is going to be diminished because the funding is not going to be there. So it'll be diminished, but it'll still be relevant. It'll still be there. You'll never be able to totally extract that ideology. But maybe now that Iran is gone, and that Iran is no longer a threat, an Islamic threat in the Middle East, maybe now the Palestinian Authority and Hamas will back down a little bit and will stop teaching their kids about the evils of the Zionist entity, as they call it. Maybe now education in countries like Bahrain and Qatar might stop educating children to go and kill Jews. Maybe now the mindset in the Middle East will change from a religious war, which this has always been. This has never been a land war. It has been a religious war funded by Iran for the most part for the last 30 years. Maybe now, with Iran no longer a player, maybe now the ideology will slowly change, and people will realize that without religious zealotry and without the massive push for religious extremism, life could be good for everybody. And the protesters in the States and in Europe will disappear because the funding for them is going to dry up too. And you're always going to have your crazy lefties. They're always going to exist, and they're always going to be critical of everything the right does. They're always going to be critical of everything that anybody does. This is a fact of life, and this is something that we're not going to change. And there's no way we're going to change that. But at the end of the day, nobody could argue that this is a bad thing. There are very few people out there who could argue that the removal of the mullahs, the removal of the Ayatollah and his gang of horrible people is a bad thing, is a negative thing, or is something that's going to hurt the world. Nobody's going to argue, nobody normal at least, will argue that removing the leadership of Iran will somehow be harmful to the region or harmful to the rest of the world. And if you want to argue that, please, I want to hear the argument, because I can't think of the downside of this. So if you really want to argue this, send me an email, howie@israelnewstalkradio.com. I really want to hear your argument, because I can't think of anything. And usually when I prepare my shows, I usually try to think of all sides. I try to debate it. I debate it in my head. I try to figure out which side is right and which side is wrong, or which side I believe in, which side I agree with. I do that. In this case here, looking at the situation we're in right now, I can't see a downside. Now, if there is a downside, please let me know. I know somebody's going to send me an email saying American imperialism, they're going to take over Iran and run the oil there. But even if that's the case, and Trump said that will be the case, that American oil companies will take over the oil in Iran, even if that is the case, I still don't see the downside. I believe strongly that America's not going to stay in Iran forever. They can't. They didn't stay in Iraq forever, 20 years. But hopefully it'll take a little less time to create a government that will be a stable and effective government in Iran. Hopefully America won't have to stay there very long. And once an effective government's running in Iran and the country's running like a normal country again, maybe, just maybe, American companies will pull out of Iran, or maybe American companies will work with the governments of Iran and distribute the wealth fairly within the country. The only wild card in this whole thing, in the way I see it at least, is if another radical regime rises to replace the radical regime that was there. So when Ayatollah Khomeini died, the original Ayatollah Khomeini died, another radical regime, we thought that maybe that would be the end of the radical regimes, but another radical regime rose to replace him. So one would hope that another radical regime is not going to rise to replace the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. I'm hoping that another radical regime doesn't rise. But I think with American troops there, and with the Israelis watching, and American companies running the oil fields, I think a more moderate government will rise, and the ones that have so far expressed an interest seem to be more moderate than the ones that were in power for the last 30, 40 years. So one hopes that the world will see the light and will realize that the Persian Empire that fell this past weekend is truly a sign from God. There's no other way to put it. I don't usually talk like this, but there's no other way to put it. A Persian government falls on the weekend that we celebrate the fall of a Persian government. It's just divine revelation, in my opinion. But that's my humble opinion. You could have yours. I'm entitled to mine. You could have yours. But I think that is what's going on now. And I think that the world is better off. I really believe that we could breathe a little easier, that when this all stops and the final Iranian missile flies out of Iran and is stopped from flying out of Iran, and a new government takes over, that the Israelis will be able to live normal lives, that they won't have to look over their shoulder every 2 seconds. They won't have to be 5 seconds away from a bomb shelter. They might be able to live normal lives and raise their children normally, something they haven't been able to do in an extremely, extremely long time. And I hope and I pray that is the end result of this. That is why Israel's involved in this, They are sick and tired of being the target all the time. But once the major funding is removed, and if Saudi Arabia and some of the other countries sign the Abraham Accords, then there will be no fear in Israel. Israel will be able to live peacefully, trade with their neighbors, run their country like a normal country without radical Islamic idiots coming in and trying to kill their people and destroy their country from internal. The only thing they'll have to worry about is radical Americans and Europeans who will try to continue the cause out of the with the idea of liberalism in their minds and try to continue the cause to destroy Israel from external. But those idiots are easy to deal with. It's the ones you don't know. It's the ones you don't understand. It's the ones that come out of nowhere that are much harder. The ones that are funded under the table by despotic regimes like the Iranian regime. Those are the harder ones to deal with. But the American idiots, the European idiots, we know who they are. We know what they are. They've shown what they are in the last little while, in the last couple of years. Since October 7th, for sure, they've shown who they are. They've shown that they are puppets of the Iranian regime. They show that they are the ones who support terror organizations like Hamas, like Hezbollah. They've rallied in the streets calling for the globalization of the Intifada. They've rallied in the streets calling for the death of Jews. They've rallied in the streets calling to gas the Jews. They've made it very clear who they are. And as long as we are clear who they are, and we understand who they are, and we are comfortable with who we are, I don't think they could hurt us. I don't think they could hurt us. We have to stay strong. We have to understand where we're coming from. We have to understand where we're going. We have to understand the way the world works. So I think that this Purim, which is Monday night and Tuesday, I think that this Purim should be celebrated gleefully. Should be celebrated with all joy and vigor in the Jewish community. I'm sure, I'm positive that the celebrations will be fierce and joyous and happy. We have to celebrate Jewish victory. The fall of Iran, in my opinion, is a major Jewish victory. Even though it wasn't only Jews that took care of this, it wasn't only the Israelis, it's a major Jewish victory. And then we have to take a look at the influencers, the people who continue the blood libels against the Jews. People like Tucker Carlson, people like Candace Owen, who continuously talk and forward blood libels with radicals who push narratives that are indescribable against the Jewish people, against the state of Israel. Tucker Carlson just recently released an episode where he was talking about the removal of the Iranian regime wasn't because they're terrorists, it was over money. And while money does play a part in everything, I'm pretty sure that the liberation of millions and millions of Iranians, I'm pretty sure that there was more to it than just money. But the cynicalism and the hate shown by these commentators. Now, we're never going to stop that. We're never going to get them to stop talking. And they're going to say what their sponsors want them to say. They're not just going to express their own opinions. They're going to say what their sponsors want them to say. Which is why I love doing this show. I don't have any sponsors. I don't have to worry about what I say. My sponsors don't tell me what I have to say. My shows are not sponsored, and that's intentional. I've had offers. I've said no. Because we're not going to be beholden to somebody else's opinion. I am not going to sit on a show and tell you what someone else thinks. Everything I say on the show are my own personal thoughts. You could agree with me. You could disagree with me. If you disagree with me, you could always contact me, Howie@IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. I'll be more than happy to answer your emails. I'll answer you on the air. I'll answer you by email. I don't believe, not even for a second, that I should ever be sponsored, because that might stifle what I have to say. And I'm never going to do that. So I turn away sponsors. I turn away money for these shows. I don't get paid to do them, and I turn away money for these shows. And it's a conscious decision I make. And I really think that every commentator who's online, every commentator who does a show, should do the same thing. Now, I know some of them want to make livings from this, and that's fine. You could make a living. But if it's going to affect what you are saying, because if you take a look at Tucker Carlson 10 years ago and 20 years ago, and you take a look at what he's saying today, he contradicts himself greatly. Now, someone's opinion could change over time, but that radical of a change, I don't know. I've been doing this show for as long as Tucker Carlson's been on the air. I've been doing radio, and as long as he's been on television, I've been on the radio. And if I listen to the first episode I have done, and I listen to the last episode, this episode here, that I've done, you will see that my opinion hasn't really moved. Hasn't really changed. It generally doesn't. That's not how people work. It evolves a little bit, and you'll see the evolution. If we listen through all 30 years of my show, you'll see the evolution of my thought process. As I learn more things, as more things happen, as things change in the world, the evolution of your thoughts change, and you think different things. But at the end of the day, the core belief is still there. And that's not the case with Tucker Carlson, with Candace Owen, with a lot of other commentators. So be careful who you believe. In fact, I always say it, don't believe me. Don't believe a word I say. Always check, always research before you believe me. And you should do the same thing before you believe anybody else. Because a lot of people are influenced by money and by sponsors and by the way that their show gets on the air. I thank God, I really do, that Israel News Talk Radio and True Talk Radio don't bother me about my opinions. They don't bother me, and they don't tell me what I have to think and what I have to do. They allow me to say what I think. They allow me to run the shows the way I want to run the show. They allow me to express my opinion, to be happy. And I appreciate them for that. Because not everybody has that luxury. Like I said, be careful who you listen to, be careful what you believe, and always look everything up. Find multiple sources for everything. Because what you might think is the truth and what they might present to you as the truth with irrefutable evidence, as they say, may not be the truth at all. I'm Howie Silver. This is Political Hitman. We're heard on Israel News Talk Radio. Thank you so much for joining me. I do appreciate it. I really love the fact that you joined me. And I will see you again next week right here on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. Thank you so much.